I think there's a lot of stuff in the comic industry to worry about. I think there's some really major problems. I think there are aspects to the comic industry that are so fragile that they're just not going to hold. They're not going to hold forever. At the same time, I don't believe the comic industry is in imminent danger of collapse. Or maybe a better way to put it is the things that people say are leading to an imminent collapse are not the things we should be worried about. It's kind of like you're driving down the road and you're really concerned that your brake lines are going to suddenly snap and you're going to crash. And you're so fixated on this, you kind of ignore the idea, the fact that you're swerving into the other lane into incoming traffic. That's how it feels. But it's an interesting place to be. So let's talk about where really are we at? Hey everybody, this is Perch. Maybe this is just my hill to die on. And if this is my last video, not that the channel is going away anytime soon. Yeah, my goal is to build up to 10,000 subs and then stop doing videos. That's the clearest, the best money-making idea I could have. No, I think that the hill I'll die on is that I think the comic industry has really deep problems. I think that it's something I love, so of course I'm protective of it. It's something I've made money off of. It's something I hope to make a lot of money in many different avenues in the future. So I'm very protective of that future. And I think that there are sometimes people who kind of close their eyes like the comic industry is great, oh, wonderful industry, blah, blah, blah. But they ignore some real major problems. How people are getting hired, how projects are getting picked, how projects are getting curated, and how those how projects, once they're done, kind of die on the vine because nobody bothers to promote them. I mean, you take a look at this. This is one thing that consistently really irritates me about Marvel. And I cannot get anybody at Marvel to have an honest argument about this. Emphasis on the word honest. They go through the trouble of creating a new character or getting a new voice in comics. They've got this Voices Indigenous comic coming out, Indigenous Voices coming out. So it's some Native American creators. Now, for the record, there are some amazing Native American storytellers and artists. That's a very unique art style, not to categorize it all into one umbrella because different people have different styles, but there's some really amazing art that comes out of there. I think in terms of comics, there's a lot of Native American art that really lends itself to comics and storytelling. So Marvel's doing this book, but I have absolutely zero hope at all that it will be successful. And the biggest reason being is they've issued a statement, like a press release, and then I'm willing to bet there will be one kind of brief mention of this somewhere, and that will be it. Even when Marvel gets its hands on arguably a huge name, I mean, the J.J. Abrams and Sons Spider-Man was, a big deal for them. A really well-known creator, somebody, big deal. Sarah Pichelli is doing the art, and this is going to be a major, major title for them. By the time the second issue shipped, they were done with the marketing. There was none. There was no follow-up PR. There was no follow-up stories on their website. It was done. And so, I'd love to see an influx of Native American talent in comics. Absolutely, I would. I will support this project, sure. But I will support it holding my nose a bit because I know that it's like they're shoving this thing out so they get that initial press release and they don't care about the actual product that goes out the other end or making money off of it long term. Because if they did, they take care of it a little bit. It's like the person who has the baby. I've always wanted children. And so they have a baby and then they never go home. They don't show up to the house. They keep themselves busy at work. It's like, why did you start this in the first place? I think that, and I've just used this as an example, got a little long-winded. I think that the comic industry has massive problems where this stuff's concerned. I think there's a lot of really talented creators who find themselves quickly priced out of monthly comics. Priced out being, the page rates that the companies, the publishers are willing to afford are well below what they need to survive. And so you get people, it's almost this ugly system where You get better and better at your craft, you get more and more of a name for yourself, and then as soon as you hit a certain point, you get a tipping mode where maybe if you're lucky you get covers, or more likely you just kind of vanish. You get to do artist alley stuff, you get to do signings and commissions, but the publishers have moved on to somebody cheaper. I think those are major problems. What I don't think are major problems, but seems to generate the majority of the airspace on social media and YouTube and everything else, is this woke agenda, this giant social engineering plot. It's every video. There's at least somebody who's commenting that perspective, and I've mentioned it before. I want to talk to you. I want to interview you. You're my next interview. Let's do it. The next Friday drinks. Come on, let's talk about it. A couple people said, yeah, I'd like to do that when I asked last time, and then they disappeared. So I'd like to talk to you. I would, because I think it's an interesting part of the bigger all social story that we're talking about. And if you want to say in a broader human perspective, with everything in our culture and our lives, that some of this kind of revisionist history and all the rest of that stuff is a big problem, I can sign on to that. I can sign on to this idea that, as a species, we are too quick to, throw away our history, and too quick to jump on to kind of, bandwagon type topics. And we're too easily led. I watch John Oliver from time to time, and I've come to hate that show. And I guess John Oliver too. And the reason is it's so manipulative, and if you watch, there's a definite structure to everything he does. He'll roll out a fact that is not a fact, but something very, very dubious, like the entire court and jury system is inherently racist. And while your head's like, okay, well, let's see how he backs that up with facts, he quickly dodges to a joke, like a cheap joke, like, he'll put up a picture of a jury that's got the Muppets in it. He's like, I'm looking at you, Ernie with your hair. And it's like, it's meant to be this kind of segue joke. And then maybe he'll kind of chuckle a little bit and make another little joke. And then he continues with a segment as if that joke were the facts. That was the proof. That was the showing the work. He just goes on to another platitude. And so you never actually get the proof. The proof is all extremely circumstantial. It's extremely fluffy. If you just poke at it just a little bit, it collapses. But it's presented in this packaged news format with a guy behind a news desk. And if you ever really kind of poke him on it, then he's quickly able to go, well, I'm a comedy entertainer. I'm not a newscaster. It's like, yeah, but you're presenting yourself as news. At any rate, my point here is that I do think that there are problems kind of in how we digest and lead things. But in comics, I think there's more immediate critical problems. I think that the inter-network nepotism kind of area of hiring is a problem. The idea that you get people who are completely undertrained to do their job, or overworked, or more likely both. We've heard a lot of people complain about editors in comics and what they're doing. But one of the reasons why I don't prescribe to this giant kind of sneaky, subversive, woke agenda that's everywhere in comics, one of the reasons where places where that breaks down is look at the people who are the editors who are, in theory, promoting some of this stuff. Don't you think if there was a real agenda to be had here, a real agenda to be had here, I'm not saying that these people do not have maybe some of these ideas in their heads, but if there was a real concerted effort, don't you think they do things like, I don't know, promote the comics that are feeding that agenda? But whether it's, kind of Fearless, Women at Marvel, or Hickman's X-Men, or Donny Cates' Venom, or this Voices Indigenous thing, it all gets about the same amount of promotion. It's just comics are just shoved out the door. And then you just, if there's some buzz around it, cool. But don't you think if they were trying to really manipulate the world, they'd like market and promote and push these things more? But they don't. They just throw somebody on the title, use them up, throw somebody new on a title. It comes across a lot more like somebody's either busy, lazy, or incompetent than any kind of sneaky plot. I don't buy into sneaky plots from dumb people. I'm sorry. I hate to say it that maybe that bluntly. I think that there's a lot of problems in comics. I just think that we're at the battleground. Like if I look out at the battlefield where the battle is raging for what's wrong with comics, it always feels like the wrong battle. It feels like everybody's out in the field, with swords at each other, but meanwhile the castle is just crumbling because there's not enough money, care, time, and attention. One of the biggest complaints I have about Marvel is that they keep themselves like a walled garden. If you come in and try and give suggestions or like you can't get there. It's a very, in many cases, very arrogant culture where they're just right. And it comes down to, hey, your digital strategy, it sucks. No, it's not. It's perfect. Is the answer from Marvel? It's like, no, it clearly sucks. You're not making any money. Oh, says you, and they just keep doing it. I love comics. I absolutely love comics, and I've said this before. I love all the comics that come out. The fact that they're coming out. I don't love the content of each of those comics. There's comics that are definitely for me and comics that are definitely not for me, but it warms my heart to see all the different comics coming out, to see all the creators, whether they're good people, bad people, left, right, center, anarchist, whatever the hell they happen to be, snake magician, that they are able to, that they're putting out comics. Yes, absolutely. Somebody will put in the comments, the left-leaning people are putting out more comics than the right-leaning people. That is true. However, if you want to make a comic, generally speaking, you can get it in somebody's hands. Love him or hate him, if Richard Meyer could pick up a comic and try and get it produced, and then an established veteran of the comic industry called and prevented that from happening, and the world rose up against him, and all this mess happened, but he was still able to go get it crowdfunded out. It means that you can be successful. Maybe not like you should be able to be, maybe with way too many obstacles than you should reasonably have, but there's no excuse to preventing you from getting a comic out. Nobody is stopping you from getting a comic out. They may be making it more difficult, no doubt about it, and that should be addressed. That's one of the problems in comics. But if you have a story to tell, you are able to tell that story. And that's a good thing. I don't know how to balance the line between, I think there are real problems in comics, and I also think that comics are also okay, and most of the things we talk about are kind of irrelevant to the problems. It sets up a weird place, and I think it confuses people too. They come to this channel like, oh, here's somebody who's going to rage against comics with me. And it's like, no, not really. I think the John Ridley Batman is fine. I mean, it's fine. People are going to read it, not read it. Who cares? It really, in the grand scheme of things, I don't really care. And then the other side would come out and be like, oh yeah, it's somebody who's on our side, who's and I'm like, no, there's deep seated problems within comics. Like, who are you? That becomes a thing. I don't know. I think it's time for everybody to kind of wake up a little bit and open their eyes and say, what are the real barriers here? Because otherwise, we're just going to have this petty argument right off a cliff. We are in a magical time right now where, like I said, if you want to get a comic out the door, you can. Again, maybe not in the best way, but you can. I think we should be worrying more about, protecting that, making sure that whatever barriers are still in the way, what makes it, sure, you can get a comic out the door, but maybe it is more difficult than it should be. What are those difficulties? Let's get that taken care of. And I think we've got to spend maybe a little bit less time. And people can do whatever they want, but maybe a little bit less time with the who is Whisper Network number 4, or the conservative hate group number 5, or whatever it happens to be. I mean, continue to go at it, but maybe if you're spending 8 hours a week on this topic, maybe take 1/2 hour. Just that's all I'm asking, like 1/16 of that time, and focus on some of the other things. Because if we don't solve those, it's not really going to matter whether the left, the right, the whoever wins. It's really not going to matter. Just Tess Fowler and Alex DeCampi running a Whisper Network. Does it really in the grand scheme of things, if if the page rates are sub $100 and there's no marketing or promotion, so no comic can ever get past 5-10 issues, at what point does that whisper network even matter? And by the way, and please, I know, I'm not saying these things are irrelevant. I'm just saying they're stumbling blocks. They're not walls. I think there are walls that we have to really worry about and get rid of. I really do. Otherwise, again, we're just going to have one side or the other will win the battle, but everyone loses the war. What do you think? I know this isn't a popular perspective. I'm tired. It's hot. I haven't had my tequila yet. Speaking of which, Patron. When you're fed up with comics, but you also love them, Patron. Goes down smooth, comes up smooth. Patron. Leave your comment below, like, subscribe. Thanks for listening to all my crazy rambly nonsense. I appreciate it. Thanks for listening.